Look up the word crazy in the dictionary and you might just find an asterisk beside the definition that says, listen to the Subiquitous podcast featuring Sue Duffield and you'll find out what crazy means. Sue's travelogue journey of unfiltered stories, impossible miracles, and faith-filled fun will be revisited right here. So buckle up and let's get going with this humorous travelogue of an unfiltered saint, Subiquitous.
I'm so excited for this particular episode for more reasons than one. But my number one reason is because Deanna Shrodes has a story that you will not believe, but you're going to put it in your, like a feather in your cap. You're going to say, there's hope for me in the most impossible situations. Deanna is not only a pastor, she's an amazing speaker. She's a lover of women and also a leader of women. But you know what? Deanna, you're my friend most of all, and I love that too.
I love it too.
I was trying to think how long it's been we've known each other. Oh,
a very long time. A very long time. You and Jeff, the first time I ever saw you was when you came to my church to sing when I was just a kid, and you guys came.
So you were what?
Sorry to make you feel a little older than you
That's all right.
already feel.
And it's funny because I'm getting a lot of that now. I'm getting a whole lot of that now, but that's okay too. But those were the days you're a good singer too and great worship leader, but you've kind of transitioned now into more of a mentor of women. Tell us a little bit about how God's taken you through this journey of ministry. It's amazing.
Well, God has taken me through quite a journey from mostly being involved with music for so many years to then really transitioning to more of a speaking, leadership, team builder, developer. My number one thing that I really love doing more than anything at this point is team building, team development, leadership development. I thrive on all of these things. I love leadership development and building teams and doing things through the power of teams. And so that's been just something I'm very passionate about, particularly, I would say, the last 10, 15 years, especially.
But you can't do any of this unless you love people. And if there's one thing and there's one thing I got to say about both your husband, Larry, and you, both of you, you have been embracing congregations from Pennsylvania to Florida in your pastoral roles, but more so than that, what we watch from the outside looking in, we see a couple who just loves people, and that's what makes a difference.
Absolutely. That always drives me crazy when I hear people make these statements like ministry or leadership or pastoring would be great if it weren't for the people. And I think, well, I do understand having a bad day. We all have a really bad day. We've all had our betrayals. We've all had terrible things happen to us. Every leader has. But that is why we are there for the people. And I always say there's only one reason to be in leadership, and that's to help people. And if you're not there to do that, well, then it's time to step down and let somebody lead who's going to be there to help people.
Exactly. And there's nothing to me more exciting than watching someone that you have mentored and you've encouraged along the way, and you set them free, and now they go on and do incredible things for God. And I know that's happened to you. Yeah.
Yes, I thrive on that. I thrive on seeing people go further and higher, and to be even a small part of their journey is so exciting. That's really what it's about. Not where God is taking me so much, but where is God taking the people under my care?
Right.
And leaving people better than I found them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about.
And so the beginning is as important in my later years. I'm a little bit ahead of you here. But I have to say, when you get to be that 60 plus in your life, you're going to find out the significance factor is much more important than anything. And you're already doing it now, though.
I'm trying. I think that there's nothing greater than to have people say that you've been an influence in their life in some positive way, or that you've helped them to get where they are today. I mean, not that you've been totally responsible for it, but you know what I mean.
Right.
That you've had a part in it is just incredible.
What are the trends too you're seeing? Is it different than it was 20 years ago in leadership? Is it different in being a pastor and also a pastor's wife? Because you're a dual role. You're not only pastor,
Yeah.
but you're also the pastor's wife. So you're seeing a lot of things. What are some things that you're seeing that have changed?
I don't even think we probably expound upon this because it's probably been talked about so much, but COVID-19 just turned everything upside down for all of us to where it will never be the same again. So there's all of that. But I think even before we experienced COVID, I believe that there was such a shift that people don't necessarily automatically respect you now as a leader when they first meet you, whereas respect just used to be automatic and then you would have the potential of losing it. Now, you have to earn people's respect all the way around. And people kind of doubt you. They've had a lot of experiences before, perhaps with people that they have not trusted or people that they've hurt them, or they have fears where leaders are concerned. And you don't always start off with the currency of trust that people used to be able to do many years ago. You know, you automatically just had authority and influence and respect. And now all of those things have to be earned. And so I think that it can be trying that you don't automatically just come in with chips to cash in, if so to speak. There are just so many trends that have happened. People are busier than ever. People see church differently than they ever have before. It's just everything's been turned on its head, and we've had to learn to pivot to continue to help people to our highest ability.
And it's almost like you have to undo before you do. Remember how simple it seemed like when we were kids and you wanted to talk about Jesus in your public school, or you wanted to do a witnessing program in your community, and you didn't have to go jumping through hoops like you do now.
Absolutely.
I even talked to a gal recently that all she wanted to do in her community, Deanna, was just offer a free lunch for young mothers and bring it into the church and encourage all young moms to come and bring their kids to have a chance for everybody to meet. You cannot believe the regulations and the rules that they had to go through that was never there, as you stated, before COVID.
Yeah, everything's gotten much more difficult.
And it's not even maybe the health issue anymore. I think it's more of a stigma.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to struggle through that. But the cool thing is, as you well know, God does crazy things in a crazy time.
Yes. Amen.
And if we didn't have the hope and belief for tomorrow, why would we even? That's why with this podcast, I mean, who would know that this would be in over 17 nations? Who would know that you'd be
It's
speaking
incredible.
probably about 10,000 people? We don't know what God is going to do. And we never know from one minute to the next how God is going to use your gifts and your talents. And that's what I've loved about the entire Shrodes family, for that matter, all your kids and everything.
Oh.
You've just adapted and grown and become great leaders. And we're just so grateful for that.
Well, thank you. And I'm grateful for you and Jeff and your influence in our lives. You are really an example to all of us. And I'm so thankful for the times when you've spoken into my life. Thank you for stepping up to do this podcast. I'm grateful for the changes in the world that have caused you to feel the calling to do this.
It was a total absolute dare. Somebody dared me to do this. And I thought, well, okay, I'll take that dare. Little did we realize. But another role has happened since you and I have talked. Oh, this grandmother role is a whole
Oh my
new ball.
gosh.
How has that changed even your attitude in ministry? How does that change?
Well, you're much more mindful of the generations and how we're impacted by our grandparents and how we want to make an impact as a grandparent. For me, my only grandchild right now is 7 hours away. And so that is a little bit of a challenge, but it's just challenged me to become more creative in how we can stay connected. We're going to go very quickly from one grandchild to 4 because her parents are having twins in just 9 days. If
Wow.
her mother doesn't go into labor sooner, they're going to induce her in 9 days. And then our oldest son is expecting, he and his wife are expecting as well in February. So within 6 months' time, we'll go from 1 to 4. And 1 will be close by, 3 will be far away. Not as far as they could be. So I always console myself with that this could be more. It could be
be. That's
California
right.
and not Georgia. Staying connected is really important. You know, I always envisioned myself being like my grandmother, who practically raised me, lived across the street, was the biggest influence in my life. That's what I was dreaming and desiring. And then, our son moved to Atlanta. So it's a little more of a challenge. I'm not that across the street grandmother that I dreamed of. And I think so many people face that because, rarely do people's kids just live around the corner anymore.
Right.
So many people are long distance grandparents, and you just learn to adapt and pivot with that too, to be able to be an influence as you long to be and as God would have you be to your grandchildren. You want them to remember the special times that they've had with you and how you've invested in them and taught them about Jesus as well as what they're receiving from their parents.
And what you've done, you've just added this to your file as being even more efficient at leading women, because now you're not only as a mom and then a mom of teenagers and then a mom of adult children and then a mom of daughters-in-laws. Here's the thing, now you've become a grandmother. So I think there's even a wider approach or even a wider appeal to ministering. And that's how I've looked at it as I've transitioned as I got older.
Yes.
Who was it that just said this recently? Kathy Lee Gifford. Actually, this is a great quote. She said, "I don't believe in retirement. I believe in refirement."
Oh, I love that.
I know, I'm being refired. And Deanna, that is you. When I
Yes.
think of somebody who has evolved and just continued to just go over hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, and at the same time making yourself more approachable and better to a world that so desperately needs women like you in leadership, you know what? You are refired.
That is a huge compliment. Thank you.
I believe that. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it.
I try to live that way. And I think one of the most important things in that is that with whatever stage I'm in, with whatever season I'm in, and whatever I'm going through, I try to be, not just as a buzzword, but in reality, really transparent about it. Because I've learned that even though I say some things, admittedly, sometimes my husband holds his breath and is like, I can't believe you're getting ready to tell people this. I mean, he gets scared. He gets legitimately scared. He will say things like, I'm not even kidding. He will say, what about your credentials? He will say these things like, my ministerial credentials. Are you sure you want to say this? And I'll say, Larry, people need to hear this. And it's surprising that as I tell them, and I don't mean just telling them in a leadership meeting with 6 to 8 people, I mean standing on a stage and telling them, it's amazing how people come so much closer.
Yes.
I've never felt that anyone is moving close to me. If I get up and say, hey everybody, I'm Deanna Shrodes, and I've written this book and I've written this book, and I want to tell you that this has happened to me, and I graduated from school here. I don't feel anybody come close to me when I share those things. But when I share about being on depression medication, it's unbelievable how people will come close.
Right.
I mean, scores of people, like, I don't have enough time to answer all the mail.
That's right.
And I haven't had anybody yet disrespect me or say, now, years ago, people would say, you better not let anybody know that. It's okay, but you better not let everybody know things like that. You're going to have people that may not think you're fit to lead. They may not, you may not be able to get a church. I mean, these type of things,
Right.
And when I just really got over caring about that and just decided I'm just going to be real and truly transparent, I don't find that people respect me less. I find that they respect me more, and they come closer, and they feel like I'm safe to talk to.
And that's the biggest thing. Right there, you nailed it. How safe is Deanna Shrodes that they could have an opportunity that in a private moment say, you just spoken to my heart. Here's where I am, and I need prayer. And you are able to speak to that because you're right there.
And I did something else that a lot of leaders have told me that they would not do. They're honestly scared to do this. I do a lot of surveys with our team, with our leadership team, and some of them have their names attached. Some of them don't. It does take courage. I gave an anonymous survey one time to our team, and one of the questions was, on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel safe telling Deanna anything. And most of the scores were very high. There were a few that were lower. And I thought to myself, what about me does God need to change?
That's good.
For me to be the safest person that I can be, for my team members to approach. And I think that is so important, that people see us as leaders as safe to approach, that they can share anything with us without fear of rejection or, God forbid, some kind of retribution, or that they can share things without fear.
Right.
There's nothing we can't move through together.
Right. And if you're solid, which you are, and if you have that accountability, you're accountable to God.
Right.
I think more than ever before, rather than public display, and you and I both agree probably on this one, I'm less likely to wanting to be a stage personality, and more so behind the scenes than ever before, to encourage women around the world who are desperately seeking a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
And not just this self-promotion thing
Right.
where what's the title of my next book? And is this taking off? Is this viral? That's the great word right now. Well, how are you in the privacy of your own home when you're in your own prayer chamber and you're lifting up those names of those women that you took on that survey
Mhm.
and you take them to the throne room of God and say, bless them today? That has to be the best accountability of all because you're accountable to Him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I told you this. I love Deanna Shrodes. I've always loved her. And the thing is, she says that I came to her church when of course, I was a teenager pretty much myself almost.
Yes. Yes, I should say that. I truly believe that when you came to my church, you and Jeff, if you weren't teenagers, you were
Yeah,
just out of
I
teenage.
think so.
I mean,
We were like,
you might have just turned,
night.
I don't even think y'all were 20
No, I
years old.
know.
I don't even think you were 20. You
Right.
had to be 17,
Oh,
18,
Lord.
19. I mean, you were really
We
young.
were. We didn't know what the world we were doing. We had no clue. But, it's amazing how God, in His providential ways, I get more interaction, Deanna, from women and men, both for that matter, that talk less about singing, songwriting, speaking, but more about integrity. And they thank me constantly. Thank you for loving Jesus for 51 years or
Yes.
more, or thank you for being in ministry for 50 plus years. And it's funny because we all know we try for all these amazing things to do for the kingdom of God. But what really boils down is the integrity factor.
Right.
I'm not perfect. I know you aren't either. And I know you've got some funny stories. You always crack me up because you always have some funny stories, some funny ministerial stories about yourself. But we have this self deprecating approach in
Yeah.
ministry that is
Yes.
approachable, right? Women,
Yes.
who cares if our hair is three different colors and doesn't look right? Or,
Right.
did I ever tell you the time when I was sitting in a parking lot ready to speak for a women's event, I put lip liner around my eyes and I put black eyeliner around my lips by mistake.
I promise you, I've done the same thing. I have the same story. Oh my gosh. Wonder Twin powers activate. This is crazy. I have done the same stupid thing.
And they look like a zombie walking into the to the
Yes.
church.
Oh my gosh. So embarrassing.
I remember your big high heaven hair you used to have years ago.
Yes. Yes. The taller it is, the closer to God.
You had
Oh,
you had
yes.
some hairdos over the I know it. But you know what?
I did.
I knew somewhere along the line, I knew kind of the backstory, but I really want you to take the time to
Okay.
really to develop this. We got about 10 minutes left or more just for you. I want them to hear by far the most miraculous story besides raising your niece, which was another amazing story. But this one, I'll just preface it and I'll say from the beginning, what you're about to hear is going to blow your mind. And I did not know the details until I read it recently on one of the AG newsines or the e-zines that came out. So just begin to tell us the story about your dad.
I was born in 1966, and my mother had had a relationship with a man who was 100% Greek. And I didn't know very much about him at all or the background, but I did know that. So they had a relationship. And when she became pregnant with me, they were not married. It did not work out. And it's a long story behind that we don't have time for on this podcast. But she ended up placing me in foster care. And then I was adopted. And I was adopted in a closed domestic adoption in 1966. And so after a few months in foster care. And so years later, just to go super quick here, I'm zooming past, 27 years here. I reunited with my biological mother, and we were in relationship for the next 20, in contact for the next 20 years, 20 great years together of relationship. And the only thing between us that was a point of contention was she did not want me to know my father or know his identity or have a relationship with him or anything. And I had asked periodically. And then there came a day about 10 years ago when I really had a serious conversation. I realized that he had to be at least 80 years old, and I thought he could have possibly been already deceased or what have you. And I said, listen, the time is going by. When are you going to finally tell me his name? And she said, I'm never going to tell you. I am never going to tell you. And then she said, in fact, I'm going to go to the grave with his name.
Why do you think she did that? Do you have any idea why? What was
I do now, but it's too long of a story for the podcast. I have since put the pieces of that together, which another story for another day. But suffice it to say, she said, I'm never going to tell you. And that was a, very sad thing, because within just weeks, 2 to 3 weeks after she said, I'm going to the grave with his name, she became deathly ill. She literally was diagnosed with terminal cancer 2 to 3 weeks later. We had no clue that that was even a thing happening with her. And within a couple months, she was dead. And she took the name to the grave. Did not tell me. So I was devastated. I thought, not only is she dead, but I'm never going to know my father without a miracle of God.
right?
And I started praying about it, took some time off, went to counseling. In fact, I went to counseling for 8 months to a licensed professional Christian counselor. I was praying about it, and being Pentecostal, I was praying one day and I said, Lord, I really believe this stuff that I preach. I really believe this. I've seen it not only with me, but with thousands of others who hear from you in the gifts of the Spirit. And I said, Lord, please, you can do this. You can do this in my prayer closet, just like you can do it at an altar. I said, tell me his name. And after about 3 times of intercession, I sensed the Lord speak to me, and he said, your father's name is Gus.
Wow.
I had developed this team. I said, I love teams. Team of people, 18 people. We developed this group on Facebook that was a private group called Finding Mr. Greek. And these friends were helping me. A few of them were DNA experts. A few of them were genealogical experts. A few of them were just friends who cared. Several of them were unbelievers. Several were atheists. I went to them when I heard from God, and I said, for those of you that aren't believers, I know you're going to think I'm wasting your time and I'm crazy, but I've heard from God, and the Lord spoke to me that my father's name is Gus. I want us to look for any Gus between 10 years of my mother's age, younger and older, living in the area at the time. Even though several of them were even atheists, no one argued. They all, out of respect for me, said, we will help you. One atheist friend said, I don't believe in God, but I believe in you because you're my friend and I'm going to help you. And we ran 100 miles an hour looking for Gus. We found hundreds of people either named Gus, Constantine, Konstantinos, that all means Gus in Greek. And we started calling them if they were alive. If they were not alive, we would call their relatives, their children, their nieces, their nephews. And I would ask them to take a DNA test on one of the sites like Ancestry or 23andMe to see if we were a match.
Right.
Most of these people did that for me that I called,
That's
believe it or not. Some of them became my friend and are my friend to this day, but nobody was a match. So I was devastated. I DNA tested with all the major companies, and there was hardly anything, because I had like 1,000 matches on my mother's side because she's American, maybe only 4 or 5 on my Greek side that were very, very distant matches, because a lot of Greeks don't test. They know where they're from. They don't want to pay $99 just to find out they're from Athens or something. Right. So they don't. So a year passed with nothing. And I decided to ask my aunt, my mother's sister, about my father. I thought, I'm waiting out of respect for a year to ask her this question. And I said, I've waited a year because I know it's so hard that she's gone, but a year has passed. Would you please consider telling me my father's name? And she said, well, I'm getting older. My memory's not what it used to be. But if memory serves me correctly, his name was Gus.
Oh, Jesus, help us, Lord. Yes, amen.
And I was thrilled at the confirmation, but devastated because we had already looked at hundreds of people named Gus, and I didn't know who were we going to call.
Right.
I mean, there's no one else to call. Like, we have called everybody we can find. So I felt like, wow, this is a confirmation. Okay. So 8 years goes by. Another 8 years.
8
years.
Oh, my.
We were in a holding pattern until May the 11th, 2022, just a couple months ago, when I was on a Zoom call, a leadership Zoom call. Pastor Stephanie Smith from Washington State was teaching our Zoom call. And she said, I want all of you to write a question to the Lord. It's private. Just write it on your paper. And I wrote, when are you going to help me find my father? Because I keep asking and knocking and seeking. And my friend who was in that group I didn't know until later when I saw her paper, she shared it with me. Her third question was, will you please help Deanna find her father? Because she knew how much it meant to me.
Right.
We got out of that Zoom call, and my friend, who was part of my Finding Mr. Greek group, she was so excited. She says, Deanna, I looked on your DNA this afternoon, and they were checking it every day, my friends. They've helped me for all these years. You have a close match. You have a Greek match, very close. We're going to know within a couple hours who your father is. And they started building out this match, started building out his tree, his family tree, and figuring things out. And they figured out that he's what's known as an X match, an X chromosome match, which means that I had to match through his mother, and his mother only has one brother. And they figured out that this man who I matched with had a mother who only had one brother, and that brother's name is Gus.
Oh, wow.
I reached out to the match, and he was in Greece, and he asked me if he could call me. He called me, and he said, I'm pretty certain you're my Uncle Gus's daughter. And I said, I believe that too. And he said, what do you know about the whole thing? And I said, not much, just that my father is 100% Greek, and I believe his name is Gus. And he said, well, are you ready to hear the rest of the story? And I said, I've been waiting all my life to hear the rest of the story.
I'm nervous right now. I'm breaking out in a sweat. This is so great.
Yeah. And he shared what he knew with me, and very long story shorter, within 24 hours, I was FaceTiming with my 91-year-old father, who has never been married and has never had any other children. I'm his only person. We FaceTimed the next day.
Incredible.
And Gus welcomed me with open arms. He doesn't understand DNA, being 91 and not versed on technology like this. He doesn't, but he knew right away. He believed it because he had a relationship with my mother, and he remembered all of that. And he embraced me with open arms. And he said on FaceTime that afternoon that we met on FaceTime, he said, I woke up this morning alone in the world. And this afternoon, I have a daughter, a son-in-law, 3 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild, and I'm not alone anymore.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
I know. Right away, we started making plans. I went to visit him. He was in a facility, in a nursing home facility in Richmond, Virginia, right where I'm from and was born and placed for adoption. We met and spent a week together. And during that week, I said to him, Gus, I don't know how much time we have together on earth. I've met you at the end of your life. But the good news is that we can spend eternity together.
Amen.
But that's your choice. And he said, I want to make that choice. And I explained the plan of salvation to him. And that week led my 91-year-old father to Jesus Christ.
Oh.
And have been discipling him ever since. We jumped into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, without knowing how to swim. He had experienced back in January a wellness check. He didn't show up to a doctor's appointment, and his doctor did a wellness check. And I won't go into the details, but he was in a horrific state, and Adult Protective Services took over. He actually became a case with Adult Protective Services, and he was sent to the hospital, where he recuperated for 2 months. And then he was sent to this facility, and Adult Protective Services was basically in charge, and they didn't have a place for him, and he had no family. And so they were thrilled when I came along, and now he had someone.
Wow.
One of the fears he had was dying in that place. And he said, please don't let me die in here.
Oh.
And so Larry and I began to take legal steps to basically get custody of Gus.
Right.
And a very long story, just a little bit shorter, on July 26th, we officially became in charge of Gus and brought him home to Florida. And he has been with us ever since. And we've been thrown into the deep end of the pool of elder care. And so we are a month and 3 days in now. And Gus has been living with us ever since. And we are on a journey that is a roller coaster ride every day, but one that I wouldn't trade for the world.
Oh.
So that's a very long story,
No,
encapsulated as short as I can.
Well, we might have you back on so we can really continue the journey. But let me just say something to you. If all of the accomplishments that you have had in your life, and there have been many, obviously we talk about because we're moms and we're grandmoms, we know that. But what has this done to you in this whole process?
It has given me a whole nother perspective. I never imagined. Everyone talks about how blessed Gus is, and you took the legal steps and got lawyers and got him out of the place, and you're taking care of it. I mean, literally, he needs full-time care. He is completely, utterly dependent, 100%.
Right.
Everyone talks about how blessed he is. I'm not going to argue that. I will just say I never imagined the Lord would grant to me this opportunity. All this time I prepared. One of the reasons I am in counseling again, I'm a big believer in therapy,
Yes.
specifically spirit-led Christian therapy.
Right.
I'm in therapy again because I'm navigating a reunion, of sorts that I never thought I would have granted to me. I always expected to find a grave. I truly believed my mother had waited too long to tell me the information. I always expected to find a grave and maybe to find a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, someone to give me a picture and tell me this is what your father was like. I have coffee with my father every day. I talk to him. We share in deep conversations. I never imagined the Lord would grant me this opportunity to have this relationship in my life for however long it's going to be, until he goes into eternity. I never thought I would have this chance. So the Lord granting this to me after years, almost all my adult life of praying, searching, asking that question to the Lord on paper. People say, what is the significance of that? I've asked it a couple thousand times at least. I've prayed this prayer so many thousands of times. And the reason I tell people that is don't give up in prayer. Keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. What has it done for me, Sue? It's shown me God's love in such a deeper way for me. He's heard my cries. He cares about this in my life. He heard my heart's cry. And he met that. And it just shows me a whole nother level of his love for me, his love for Gus, allowing Gus to hear the gospel and to be saved before he goes into eternity, giving him this opportunity of a second chance, giving me this opportunity with my father. It's just mind blowing. The Lord's love for me is just exponential. I can't even describe the love I feel from the Lord to a whole different level.
And I also think, what about that atheist? Seriously, yes. She has watched this whole progression, correct?
Well, and there's a few of them.
Oh.
And what I say is this. I am so glad for social media and for proof through things like emails and Facebook pages, our private Facebook page, our emails, our conversations, because it's not just, this would be very easy to discount and think, oh, yeah, right. The Lord told her father's name is Gus. I'm sure that happened. No, I have email documentation of me saying, hey, guys, we're going after Gus. Now, the reason we missed him, people have that question, because we didn't realize the age gap. My mother, we looked 10 years younger than my mother and 10 years older than my mother.
Right.
Well, my mother was 20 when she had me and Gus was 36. So they're 16 years apart, not 10. That's why we missed him. We never dreamed my father was 16 years older than my mother. So we didn't look that far. He was born in 1930.
Right.
So we just didn't go back far enough. But it's just absolutely amazing that God would give me that opportunity and to document it in front of people, both believers and non-believers. All of my friends at that time knew. I even put it on my blog. I put it on back. I've been blogging for years and I had it on my blog that the Lord told me his name was Gus. People have seen this for years. So when it came to pass, there was all this documentation where it cannot be denied that this is what God spoke to me.
That's awesome. And the documentation of the verification of the fact that you are God's chosen, and to be Greek, even that, that just,
yes.
Did you have any idea that you were Greek at all? Did you already know that?
Yes, because my mother had told me from the very first time we saw one another face to face. She said, oh my gosh, you look just like your father. And he was 100% Greek. And I used to call him my Greek God.
Oh my goodness.
And all of this. And then when I had the 5 DNA tests done, I came back as 50% Greek in all of these tests. And so I knew that as well. And so that was a factor. And then we didn't just trust, even though you can trust a 23andMe test, even connecting it through another relative. I connected with his nephew. However, the week that Gus and I met for the first time, we took a paternity test just between the two of us. And we've since taken a legal, stand up in court type of paternity test, and we are an absolute perfect, father-daughter match. So, we did that too. But it's just the goodness of the Lord is just overwhelming in this whole thing. There's so much there's so much. It would take
I
hours and hours and
know.
hours to
Oh,
share it.
I appreciate you allowing us to look inside your heart today and look inside this unbelievable journey that came to fruition in a most amazing, miraculous way. With your permission, Deanna, I would love to use the picture of you and your dad on the actual meme of this episode.
Oh, yes.
Because I think, as was stated, and you've said it many times, you've learned so much in this process. You already said there's so much hope.
Hmm.
But there's also people out there right now that are saying, I've gone through my whole life not knowing who my parents are. And they may not have the exact excitement of finding out who they are. What could you say to somebody today? Say, man, that's great for her, but don't have any idea who my mother is or who my dad was.
I say, first of all, don't give up hope. If anybody can take hope from my story, I never imagined that my father would still be alive at 91 or that God would grant me this blessing. So, first of all, don't ever give up.
Right.
And there is a ton of support, a ton of help, a ton of hope out there. Of course, we have our hope in Jesus Christ, but there are people that are there to help you with this. I'm a big believer in, they call them search angels.
Yeah.
Search angels don't cost anything.
Wow.
Just so you know, they are free. They do not charge. And there are thousands of them out there that are standing by to help people in these situations. Another great resource is on Facebook, DNA Detectives. Many of them are professional DNA experts that help people along these lines. So I would really encourage people to go ahead and test and also go, take advantage of these type of resources, but also just reach out to people in community around you who can understand this type of thing, that might have gone through it before. There are other people like me who have gone through this before, some successfully and some the outcomes have not been as triumphant as mine. Please keep in mind that I went through a whole lot of lows for a couple
long time.
decades.
Right.
So this wasn't like this miraculous victory overnight. I mean, it was decades of longing for this.
Right.
And so, matter of fact, I watched every one of my friends succeed in this regard. And I even said to God one day in prayer, am I always going to be the bridesmaid and never the bride? I had helped so many of them, even if it was just an encouraging word or a prayer. I didn't help all of them in researching, but some of them I did, but I helped all of them with an encouraging word, a prayer, a celebration when they had their breakthrough. But I really had come to the point where I thought, okay, Lord, it really might be too late for this, but it wasn't too late.
Never too late.
And so I just encourage everyone to hold on to hope. And this has made my faith so much stronger. I've always really had a passion for hearing from God and acting on the gifts of the Spirit and what I sense stirring up in my spirit. And I've always been a huge believer in that. But this has taken it to a whole new level of confidence of God speaks today, and we need to listen. And there are so many times people will call you crazy for believing in things like this, and they'll say you've lost your mind. And to that I say, you have lost your mind. You've put on the mind of Christ.
That's right.
And the problem is much of the church, even the church today, it's not just the world that doesn't have the mind of Christ. Many people in the church don't have the mind of Christ, and they will tell you that you're crazy when you say these statements like, I was in my prayer closet and God told me this, and they're thinking, she's crazy. No, we need to get back to it being normality,
right.
that we hear from God in our prayer closet and he can tell us things.
That's right.
Not just tell us things concerning what people would consider to be a typical thing that God would tell you.
Sure.
I don't know what that would be, but that God would tell you such a thing as to a name of someone.
That's right.
The Holy Spirit can do these things.
That's right.
We're serving the same God of the Bible.
That's right. And my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory. And sometimes beyond that, it's the wants. But more than all of that, it's the desire to be used of God in the will of God at any minute. At any moment, God can change the trajectory of your life.
Yes.
And put you in a position that you never thought possible. And Deanna Shrodes, there's nobody in the world like you. I love this story. You'll be back, I promise. You know what? I want to quote what your mother said, and I'm going to do a little twist on it. You said she's going to her grave with his name.
Yes.
Now you've got a father. His name is Gus. And you're preparing him right now that he's going to go to his grave with God's name.
Yes, the name above all names.
The name above all names, and you did it. And you allowed yourself to be in a position to say, God, this is impossible. But not only have I had this time on earth with him in these however many months ahead,
yes,
but you have given him the extension of his life. And that's pretty powerful, Deanna. Thank you for being on this episode today. What an awesome thing.
Thank you for inviting me.
That's the Subiquitous podcast you can get on SueDuffield.com. In fact, on that first page, you're going to see Deanna and her dad, Gus, on that home page. And I can't wait to put that up, because you are going to now fall in love not only with a woman who loves Jesus, but you're going to fall in love with a new Greek who found Jesus as his Savior. And what a great thing. Thank you, Deanna. We'll see you next week. God bless you.